back to the EPS podcast where everything is a primary source. I am Eric Paul, and eventually I'll get my last name in here because it starts with an S, so it makes more sense. EPS podcast, everything's a primary source, and Eric Paul. And I'm glad to have you listening. Make sure you follow the show on all the social media outlets, especially Instagram. I post a lot on Instagram. And Facebook, there's a Facebook group, and patreon.com/EPS podcast if you want to support the show. So I am joined today by a man that I think I mentioned on a previous episode that I'm getting into craft brewing, home brewing, and I just happened to go to a store about 20 minutes from my house, and as soon as I walked in, I was like, I'm kind of looking into a mirror of sorts, because there's the owner, and he has a Toasters t-shirt on, and that's a ska band from the 90s.
They started in the 80s.
Yeah, that's right, late 80s or so. Anyway, a band that I have a lot of affinity for, and I spent probably the next better part of 2 hours just talking with Tim Abalo.
Hey, I'll help you out.
I'm always... So as we were talking, we came to the realization that we were born 22 days apart.
Correct.
So December of 1980 for you and January 1980.
For those who are not math intuitive, that would be 41 years of age. 41 rotations around that big sun.
And I think those are 41 pretty interesting years that have...
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, if you move that 41 back 40 years, the way that we both have gone about things and our interests and what we produce, totally different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not even, and good chance not even have grown up in the same part of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So we're broadcasting out of the seacoast of, not broadcasting at all, recording.
You could say broadcasting.
Out of the seacoast of New Hampshire and Maine, and I've hinted at it before in other episodes, but I'll say it again. Now that I grew up here because my dad was in the Air Force, and from the mid 50s to the early 90s, there was an Air Force base in Newington, New Hampshire called Pease Air Force Base, and that base was basically a Cold War base, and
now it is a hub for Allegiant Airlines.
Yes.
Very inexpensive. Long-term parking is free.
And
there are no lines, no waiting with security, which is a little troubling. But
and they better pay us now for that plug.
That's right. You're listening to the Allegiant Airlines podcast with Tim and Paul. I'm sorry I put my name first.
It's been taken over now. So we're going to go about this episode as I do all of them, and for those of you just listening for the first time, or if you forgot what we do, I have a template of questions that I use as a teacher, as well as I feel like if you remember that Jim Carrey movie, I think it was called like 23 or something.
Oh yeah,
where he's like,
23andMe. It was a podcast about genetics.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, because isn't he like running around and he's like haunted by the number 23 keeps showing up? That's how I am with primary sources. I'm like, everything's a primary source. So I'm like, I look at anything, whether it be a poster or a mailbox or anything, and I'm just like, why does that exist the way it does? What does it tell us about the time period? And so we're going to go about this the same way, but instead of talking about a thing like a movie or a TV show or a book cover or a song or anything like that, we're just going to talk about us, I guess.
Sure.
People, a person, two different people.
People are people.
And, we both kind of have a similar way of communicating. And
mostly with words.
Through words and borrowed words, clips and talks.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of, like, we have a kind of clipped, almost like, one of my favorite things about social media is being able to use, I forget if it's a GIF or a GIF.
If you say GIF one more time, I'm out of here.
So it is a GIF, right? It's the GIF of Gab.
Well, it's not giraffe. I'm just kidding.
It's on graph paper. And using those to communicate, somebody puts like they post something and then finding the right little tiny clip of a movie or a TV show that fits it perfectly. And, one of the reasons I fell in love with my wife is because early in our relationship, she started quoting the most random movies that, like one first times I ever caught onto it, it was like some throwaway part in the movie Casper. She's like, it's a piece of cake, a piece of crumb cake. I'm like, what? She's like, that's from Casper.
Said, that'll do, pig. It could have gone one way or the other.
That would have been walking a very, very fine line, because if she didn't know the movie.
I'm very careful with that one, too.
But I feel like, and I know what she and I have talked about this before, that is almost specific just to our generation. That people a little bit older than us, not so much. Like I guess we're cuspers. Is the term
Casper,
for people? Yeah, Casper. That's right. That's the movie with Bill Pullman.
Ooh, I'm here all night, folks. Try the veal.
We are cuspers in that if you're born late 80, early 81, we're not really Gen X. We're at the tail end of Gen X, very beginning of millennial.
I think someone's called us, we're not a boomer or a zoomer or a millennial. We're a doomer.
That's a good way of putting it. We're kind of like in this purgatory.
And we just don't give a
type
shit.
thing. And my dog is already causing problems.
Oh, that's cool.
Elza.
That's why I go wireless with everything I own. Wires.
I got to get to that point.
No, I'm just
we are the material. So the first question that's always asked is, what material is this made of, and how is it made? Well, we know how it's made. A person is made, and we could get very crude if we wanted to, but we all know how
we're made of many midichlorians.
That's right. It's what binds us together.
It's what binds the universe together.
But I mean, that's one of those things. Right there is for those of us born without, we're like people without without a country, without a generation. We're not really, because you think of Gen X, you think of like Reality Bites, you think of I don't know what she's doing. You think of people who were like writing laptop poetry in the 90s in coffee shops, not quite us. We weren't there. We were, they were finishing college in 1992, not, they were raising their families, or, kind of like the characters on Friends would be like classic Gen X age group. We were a little bit behind that, but we are well enough ahead of millennial. I graduated high school in 99.
Yep.
Right? Same as you.
How many times did you hear that Prince song?
Right. Every prom and dance. And we just have, I think it was like this kind of like in-between area that the material that we're made out of is almost like if you just took like the videotape section of a thrift store.
Videotapes, kids, are pre-recorded physical mediums before the internet
and before DVD.
I think someone said that we were the generation that grew up before and during the internet.
Oh, that awful sound! And for those of you who are wondering what that was,
that's a landline dial-up modem.
He didn't just have a stroke.
Yeah.
On there.
Hope the hell not. Is anybody making toast?
What's that smell?
Burnt toast is a sign of a stroke, by the way.
That's something you would not know if you didn't listen to the EPS podcast.
Right. Good thing. We save lives.
It's such a funny idea, so the material that, when we're chatting with each other, we're finding out that we're into the same shows, same movies, same kind of music.
Yeah.
I pretty much, if we, got a tandem bicycle and rode around and talked the whole time, we would probably learn even more that we have in common.
Now I want to ride a penny farthing with a monocle while I'm riding down to the BMW dealership while I'm knitting. That was a hipster joke for those who didn't catch it.
It's like, why don't you tell a little bit about what you have done in those 41 years that would be kind of proving our point of like, yeah, if it was 41 years before, wouldn't have come out that way. So what are some of the things that you're involved in?
Music, number one. But if a different time. I mean, you shift that 41 years a different way. It wouldn't be punk rock.
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't be Slayer. Sinatra's still on my spectrum, so it'd probably be more towards that. Yeah, it's hard saying. No.
So, I mean, so you have been, or you're currently active in 5 different groups, right?
5,000. I am a musician whore. Available for parties.
What kind of parties?
No, I'm not. Not at all. Yeah, so I started the Outsiders PBR, Punkabilly Rebels, 2002. And we're still going strong. We have Mr. Saint Merc of Diabetia, Mark Thompson on the drums. He has diabetes, so he's been ordained into sainthood. As so has Matt Backdraft Bartlett, Saint Backdraft, patron saint of rum drinking and upright basses.
Yeah, it is.
He just graduated law school, and he's a firefighter. So cheers to that, motherfucker. So we've been doing that. Those guys they've been with me. Been doing the band since 20 years. So, Merc joined up, I want to say like 3 years ago, 2018, 2019. And then Matt has been with me since like 07, 08. We met on Craigslist.
That is...
Ask me which section.
But that is like the most early 2000s quote I've ever heard.
Right? We met on Craigslist. That's right.
I don't know how many of those, like, you know, bassists needed, you know.
You know, and turns out we had crossed paths years before at gigs and stuff. And so, yeah, we love playing music, and we have, like, a bunch of stuff coming down the pipeline. We'll talk about that later. If you want.
Well, I do. I mean, and I think that's the kind of thing. I've talked to other musicians on this podcast before. Talked to
some big names, by the way.
Yeah, I can. I feel like
you really went to the top and then was like, shit, there's nowhere to go now.
Well, one of the thread that seems to go all the way through, whether it be a musician or last season I talked to Corey Samuels, who was on the show Lego Masters, and he not only was the reason I got on that show is because he has made his own business out of Legos, and he's, I believe, in our same age group.
He's still going to need a permit to build it, though.
Right. The code enforcement comes. And, but it's one of the things that seems to be a common thread for people who grew up in the same time period as us is that kind of DIY mentality of, you know, I don't need permission to do this. I don't need to have a degree. I don't need to have a whole lot of training. I just really need to have drive, interest. And it's really, really nice to have that coincide with, in the case of, you know, the 90s and the early 2000s, and obviously till now, the internet.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the old days, even as late as mid-1990s...
skate flyer they would send you.
Yep.
I remember the name of it. Escaping me right now. But it would always have the punk rock records on the back.
Yeah, like Thrasher would have...
what the hell? It was like a flyer from one of the skate shoe companies, or they had skate decks, Alien Workshops. And all
Yeah. That kind of stuff.
And that's where I would be like, oh, what's that record? I'm going to go check that out at, you know, my local record shop.
And that's another thing, too. Local record shops are unfortunately kind of going away, too.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
And, yeah. Picture that guy at a record shop.
He'd be playing them on phonographs. Sorry. I'll stop talking all over you.
I mean, that's just this conversation alone. I don't think would happen people a little bit younger and a little bit older. I think it's just like this particular age group, I guess, you know, the people born in that late 70s, early 80s era, even a little bit later into the 80s, it's not quite the same experience. You know, it's like we hit just the right marks. Like we were just right at the right time for all these things, like you mentioned before we hit record.
Storm.
Like we're the last generation that remembers what it's like before computers and the internet.
Rotary phones, too.
Yeah. We had one in my house.
What the hell are these letters for on the numbers? I don't get it.
But you know, if you wanted to form a band pre-Craigslist, pre-internet, you would either go to a guitar shop or a record store, and you'd
Put up
have
a flyer
with little tags at the bottom with your phone number, and hope for the best, and or chat with people, or that you ran into at different places. Hey, you want to put this together? Which, again, 40 years before, maybe, I don't know, 50s rock and roll, that early 60s.
It wasn't quite as pigeonholed, I think, as it is currently, because like there's so many genres and as far as like compositionally and performance wise, and a lot of weird like performance art stuff, and like it wasn't as straightforward. I mean, it was straightforward. Pretty much. I mean, there was like 4 different things you could play back in the 50s.
Right. I mean, rock and roll definitely like just blew up in the 60s, and by the time you get to 70, it's a different. Yeah. I mean, it's just gone. It's graduated.
Peter
in so many
Frampton's
ways.
got a voice box because he had like laryngitis. I was gonna go a little darker, but I decided not to.
We'll keep it just that instead of. I knew what you
feel. No,
but so it's a going back to so we have the internet. We learned to use it. I think that we can. Not you and me necessarily, but our generation can take credit for steering the internet the way that it has gone.
Yeah.
Like that, instead of just, because I remember early days of the web.
Being utilitarian.
Yeah, they were just like, oh, you can, find
can
out
send
movie
an
times.
email or a fax.
And do your homework and learn about whales on the CD-ROM. And that was it. Like, it was like, there was just 3 things that you do.
You've got mail.
And, oh, man, I remember going to my friend's house, because I didn't have internet at our house. We didn't have a computer. We had a word processor. That I did a word processor. Remember those? It looked like electric typewriter, but it had a tiny screen. So I'd be typing my paper using I could see 3 lines at a time, and there's like green and black font screen. And then when I went to hit print, it sounded like it sounded like the beaches of Normandy. It was like, Jesus. And for like a half an hour. And if you made a mistake on it, it was like, you had to white it out and everything. Yeah. And so a couple of my friends had internet. They had the big computer. And I remember.
It's the latest rage, kids. It's the internet.
I felt like that. It was like, Professor Frink was at our, showing. And we went over, I remember going to his house, and I was so excited. Because I'm like, we get to talk to kids from school, but on a computer. And, it took 10 to 20 minutes to dial up, and it was this whole big awful sound. And then he finally got on, and like the AOL Instant Messenger was there. And it was like, that's when I learned the etiquette of that kind of stuff, because I remember chatting with some friends and, some girls from school on there. I'm like, hey, it's Eric. And I'm at,
What was it? A/S/L. American Sign Language? No, asshole. It's age, sex, location. I bet you're definitely not an old person masquerading as a young lady.
I remember going to school like the next day and be like, hey, remember what we were talking about online? And girls were like, what? And I'm like, oh, they're 2 separate worlds. I get it now.
Or it wasn't really you.
Yeah, maybe it was your dad. I don't know. But it was just like we were there. We were on the ground floor of those changes, and we got to see it. And so I think.
So you're welcome.
It's
what he's saying.
If you were anywhere else, any other time period, we did it for you. So, who likely, and likely's in parentheses because we know who made it, but having kids in the late 70s, early 80s was, if you look at birth rates, obviously right after World War II, there's a huge baby boom, right? Lots of people having kids. By the time you get to the late 60s, early 70s, birth rates are dropping dramatically. And a lot of that has to do with people, especially women wanting to be professionals. They wanted to pursue careers, maybe going to college. They just weren't interested in having kids. Or if they were having children, they were keeping their families smaller. So even the Brady Bunch, not super accurate. And get to the late 70s or so. I mean, throughout the 70s, you have all sorts of, a lot of reasons not to have kids, energy crisis, stagflation, just, bad economy and stuff like that. So
that sounds familiar.
Understandably, deciding to have a family, was not it wasn't quite the same as it was 40 years before, right? If you go back to or we'll say 35 years before, having a kid in the mid 1940s, like our parents' age, basically,
Right.
was such a much different time. Post-war years were great. It was everybody had jobs. The
The
economy
economy was booming. That's right. Elliot Ness and his men warp speed towards Capone's hideout.
If you don't mind, tell me about your folks and the.
So my folks are 51 and 58 was the year they were born. So however old that is.
Okay.
I'm terrible. I'm a terrible son.
I thought you meant
Hi,
they're
Mom and Dad.
51 and 58 now.
No. They're like
10 years old.
90 and 99. I don't do maths so much, but they were born in Massachusetts, Somerset, Massachusetts, which is like kind of close to Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
They grew up a quarter mile from one another on the same side of the street, like in kind of a suburbanite kind of area.
Okay.
We relocated to Maine after I was born. In 1980, we moved up in 1987 to Waterboro, Maine, and I lived over there until 2005-06. Moved in with my lovely lady, Alyssa Jolene. She is an angel for dealing with me and everything she deals with in the daily. Bought a house in 07 in Shapley. I'm a recovering mechanic, and I'm showing my hands right now.
Oh.
I've been clean almost 8 years to open a beer store. I did almost 20 years in the automotive repair dealership world. Even though I talk like a salesman, I was not a car salesman. Hey, Eric, what do we got to do to put you in this car today? Come on, I'll go talk to my manager. We'll cut a deal. Come on.
I would buy a car from you if you talked to me like
You
that.
know,
but
I got a bridge in Brooklyn. It's brilliantly perfect. I'm gonna get it for you.
I have to buy that actually now. I wasn't in the market for it, but since it's
But yeah, in 2014, I opened a standalone store, the Brew Shop in Shapley, Maine, selling homebrew supplies and craft beer, cider, wine, mead, home brewing supplies, bad jokes, and good conversation. And so I do that Tuesday through Friday, 11 to 6, and then Saturday, 10 to 4. And then close it if I have a gig with my 3,000 bands, because I'm a whore.
Well, what you said there, though, I think is just also so, because like the question is who made it, who made you, but your parents obviously did, but all those things that you just listed also made you, right?
Yeah,
because
experience,
it's like, you wouldn't have been where you are now, sitting in this luxurious garage doing a podcast.
It is beautiful. The cathedral ceilings and the chandeliers are outstanding.
And the help is also nice to have.
Yes. Garçon?
Oui.
Yeah, everything is covered in gold. Everything's gold-plated. Even the crapper. People are saying it's one of the best crappers around. I do impressions, too. I don't know if I do that.
That's so good.
I'm sick. I'm mentally ill. But yeah, so I don't even know what the hell I was talking about. Trump came out. That was the end of that.
That tends to do that, He shows up and so I guess what I'm trying to say, going back to our original kind of like hypothesis, our thesis.
What
is
made
that,
you?
That it's you go back in time long. I think it's always been part of being an American. Honestly, is like I was reading. This is going to sound so conceited, but I was reading. And I'm probably going to mess up the name. Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America.
Oh, really? Yes. Let me get my monocle.
The original tourist, the French tourist from the early 19th century, and he wrote his report on as he was touring around America. And
How stupid do I think the Americans are?
well, and that's what you
They
would
buy
think,
bottled water.
But he, this is, and one of the things that he touched on, he's like, it's hard. You're hard pressed to find an American who just does one thing their whole life. Mm-hmm. And this is 200 years ago. And he's like, people who are lawyers are also, shopkeepers, and they also, and sometimes simultaneously, other times, and it's such an American trait that I don't think we've ever really lost. Sometimes I think there was a time maybe again, post World War II, where that was lost a little bit, where it was kind of like, okay, here's the pattern of your life. You will, go to school, and then you'll go to more school, and then you get a job, and then you stay in that job for the next, 40 years, and then
married,
you retire,
and you have kids.
and somewhere in there you get, and I feel like our generation, maybe a little bit before us, but the Gen X turning into millennials, have kind of gone against that. We've gone back in time a bit and said, you know what?
I'd even say that like the 60s,
Yeah.
like the free love revolution and all that shit, that was kind of the precursor. We just bucked the trend. You know what it was? It's Generation Y. Why? Because nobody thought, everybody was indoctrinated, right?
Yeah.
Like you go to school, you go to church, you come home and you do this and you're miserable and that's it. You're just here.
Yeah.
Welcome to capitalism 101. And I remember the day I didn't want to go to church anymore. I was like, why do I got to do this stuff in the summer vacation? Catechism. What the hell's this shit?
When you were, you mentioned before about moving up to Maine, was there a particular reason that your parents moved up here to Maine, or they just,
I have no idea.
it wasn't like a job, or,
I think we were running from the mob.
maybe.
So, Abalo is actually not my last name. I'm in the witness protection. No, I have no idea. Like, we came up in 87. Because I think one of my mother's brothers had a place up here, and we would come visit. And I just remember driving in the back of the 84 Nissan Datsun pickup truck. It had these split
I remember those.
cylinder spark plugs. One was a waste spark. Anyway.
But
There's a V6 that had 12 plugs. It was stupid.
it's such another thing too. It's like, obviously it's another very American quality to, if you don't like where you are, go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But definitely by the time you get
Only
to
a
the
certain
80s,
only a certain cross section of Americans can do that, though. A lot of people just get stuck in
yeah,
that's where we're born, this is what we do, this is what we are.
it was like we moved around because we didn't move around nearly as much as some kids I knew did, but we moved around some, and because of the Air Force, and then I was never in the service, but I never lost that idea of like, okay, if I'm not happy where I am, I'll go where I am happier. And I don't mind doing that.
Yeah.
I don't think twice about it. I don't really want to move ever again because it's such a pain in the ass, but it's not like I'm going to instill that in my own son. Be like, I would love it if you live near me, but if you want to go somewhere else and see what else is out there, go for it. And in this modern age, there's fewer and fewer limitations to do that. We're very fortunate, talking before about having the internet at our disposal. Traveling anywhere, you can just look it up on your map, and you don't need to.
That's how I got here.
Exactly, yeah. It's like
Below these chandeliers.
and I don't want to babble too much about that, but I think that between trying different things out, whether it be lines of work, opening up businesses, or just trying out, being in different bands, trying different kinds of music, traveling, moving, that's all very identifiable about this era, this place, and that has no choice but to influence who you are. Right? I think also is another generational thing. We both are into craft beer. You go into those craft beer places and there's always a sticker wall.
Yeah.
Either an official one or an unofficial one, kind of like what I have for
Right
my
behind
back
us,
truck.
the EPS podcast, White Wall.
It's just like either they get the stickers for themselves and put it up, or you go to the restroom and you have your sticker of your, like the first time I went to your shop, you gave me several stickers of your band, of the brew shop, and it's on our laptops, it's on the back of our cars, it's on our guitars, it's everywhere. It's such like we're signaling to the others, this is what I like.
Yeah.
Do you like it too?
Just like you were talking earlier about your friend with the Liberty Spikes.
Yeah.
The punk rocker.
Yeah.
That's the signal to the others.
It is.
Especially being in New England, growing up the time we did, we were very hard pressed to find someone if we lived remotely.
Yeah.
Like, I think there was a pocket of punk rockers at Massabesic High School in the 90s. And, you know, we kind of gravitated towards each other, and that was it. You know, then we would go to Portsmouth to the Elvis Room and Stone Coast Brewery up in Portland, or the Skinny up in Portland, or like we would find these venues. We would, and then we'd network that way. So it was always in person.
And a lot of it was, again, DIY, wasn't it? You know, if you
talked about flyers, like we figured out when they would go in Portland and tear down the flyers. So we would go the night after and before every show, countless nights going around on everything in Portland, and then go and have beers at Amigos before it became a hipster. Even.
And you make your own
touch tunes.
You know,
come on, it was back in the day when they had a 6-disc carousel, and the bartenders would play everything from punk to rockabilly to Slayer, and the patrons would come in and be like, "Hey, can you change that?" And they go, "Fuck you." Now there's a touch tunes. Ugh.
Which one is touch tunes? With it's like a jukebox, but it's just like a touch screen, and
it's silly.
There's no limits, right? You can get whatever you want on there, and it sounds like when I'm driving around my car. That's all I listen to.
Just yourself doing that?
Yeah, I record myself for 20 minutes doing that, and then I listen to myself.
Just loop it.
I should loop it. It would save a lot of time because I actually sit in front of the microphone for 20 minutes making that sound.
Pump the brakes. Hope it's not slippery out.
So each one of the things that you're involved in, we could do a whole episode on, but could I just ask about the brew shop?
Yeah.
Why did you make it?
Because I hated working for a dealership. It was, I started as, you know, like an apprentice, and I had a guy above me, and he showed me the ropes and, you know, how to diagnose, how to repair, how to not be a stupid putz, and also how to torment people till they quit.
Oh, boy.
He'd go, "Elvis, get rid of him." And I would. Anyway, so that was terrible of me. And then one day I woke up and I was the senior technician. And I had all these people below me getting all the easy stuff. And I was getting the electrical diagnosis under warranty. And I was there, you know, 50, 60 hours a week.
Oh,
and I was making what they call flat rate.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like whatever the book time the manufacturer says the repair cost takes is what you get paid. So if it takes you 4 hours and it pays 2 hours, you get paid 2 hours.
Oh.
There were, like anything else, there's always exceptions to the rule, but 90% of the time, that's what you got, you know? And then I would also have to help the other people that didn't know they were doing the gravy stuff. And I'm like, I'm burned out. I'm standing on my feet. Transmissions falling on me. My back was going out quarterly. I could almost set a clock to it, you know? And I'm like, I'm fucking done.
Yeah.
I'm done. And so we started selling homebrew supplies. So my wife Alyssa had a health food store, which is where my brew shop is now.
Okay.
And then it kind of got a lot of momentum. And then started selling beer. And then they relocated into their current location. And I did the math, and I'm like, I think I can do this. Because I don't have to commute.
Yeah.
I've done the math. This is what I need to make a day. Let's do it.
That's awesome.
Fuck it. You know?
And I assume you had interest in beer and beer making and stuff beforehand.
Absolutely.
It wasn't like you're just like, I'll try this.
Brewing, I want to say like 2000, maybe 2008. There was a local guy, Steve Loigden, and he had Shapley hops around the corner from my house.
Okay.
And so he would come see my band play. You know, it was wicked fucking cool. And so we became pals or whatever, and then he passed away, and kind of as an homage, I started selling the brew supplies.
I see.
Because, you know, when supply is gone, demand goes up.
Right.
You know, I did the figuring on that, and it's been December 1st will be 8 years.
Wow. And I assume you like it a lot. It's,
you know, it's definitely more freedom to not have to punch a clock,
Right.
and fight for your dollars,
Right.
and question. I don't think accounting did this right or some shit. But in the inverse, no paid vacations,
Right.
no sick days. You take a day off, people lose their minds. They're like, "Why? Well, how come you're closed?"
Yeah.
Or you hear, and any small business, especially in the brewing industry, I drive by all the time. You never open.
Yeah.
Like, I've actually opened a lot. You just drive by at the wrong time.
It's so. I mean, it seems like it was like right at the exact time that home brewing was really taking off.
Yeah.
Was when this all kind of came together because. And I did an episode on homebrew and craft beer a little while ago. More craft beer than homebrew stuff, but it seems consistent. Again, our generation we've grown up with. I mean, when I was a kid, I don't think organic, locally sourced, sustainable, those didn't mean anything.
No, you had a chicken and you got the eggs.
Right.
That was it.
That was the closest thing you got. I mean, grocery store, processed foods. I mean, that was like, it wasn't.
Stouffer's lasagna.
And-
Ready in 4 hours.
And I didn't drink beer as a kid, but my dad did. And I really don't even remember what he had. It was probably just like Busch beer, Budweiser or whatever. And I feel like a lot of food and drink all kind of crested a wave at the same time, early 2000s or so, where people were like, not only would I like to know a little bit more about what I'm ingesting and maybe even have a hand in getting it from, its original, from its ingredients to, but maybe I could play around with it a little bit and see what I can come up with myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's, again, I don't want to take responsibility like I did before the internet.
Credit,
but
not responsibility. Responsibility's for a bad thing.
Okay. Take credit, which I don't deserve either, because for the longest time I was Mr. not so much against homebrew, but I was Mr. Anti-craft brew. I was like, it's snob stuff. You always have to hear a story every time somebody pours you a beer, and I don't have time for that. Just give me the simple stuff.
The sand for this glass was harvested in.
But these places are the same reason I used to love going to a, independent record store, because the person behind the counter there, or stocking the CDs and the records, knew their shit.
Correct.
Like, you could go to them and be like, "Hey, I liked this. Do you have anything else like it?" Like, well, they did a show back. They'll know, and they'll, without judgment, give you their recommendation.
Yeah.
Video stores used to be the same way. The independent video store. So all that kind of like indie style, even though it went away in some industries.
DIY.
It went away in some industries. Like, I mean, you can't even find a video store anymore. But like,
what, Blockbuster's not around?
oh no, like even the one in Alaska closed. But you can. But even Blockbuster took over. I mean, they were. Yeah. Nothing against former Blockbuster employees, but they weren't the experts. They were just checked. It's like we lose it there, but then it's almost like it has to exist in some place or another. You always have to have the passionate, interested, knowledgeable expert in some field or another, whether it's a comic book store or in this case, a craft beer store and a craft beer supply store. So, I think that it is, something that our generation kind of has to involve itself in. As for your bands, the ones that you've made yourself, why did you make those? Were you just not satisfied enough listening to music or going to shows?
No, I was inspired by it. And the fact that, again, coming back to the indie DIY stuff, the Amazing World Crowns, Dropkick Murphys, the Bruisers, like all this stuff back in the 90s, that you would see them at little clubs, and a lot of the guys would take the time to talk to you.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm just a fucking teenager, and I have your record, and I see the liner notes, and I read them, and you're talking to me. This is, and maybe starstruck, is that a word that would resonate here? Because I'm a fanboy,
Of me, mostly, right?
Of you, of course. Of course.
Yeah. You're starstruck. Yeah. Well, I feel the exact same way. And And sometimes in a way, I feel like those kind of guys don't want that feeling of starstruckness.
Yeah.
Because they're like, no, it's the most democratic form of music around.
Yeah.
You know, when I remember when I was
Here
talking
it is.
to,
Do you want it or not?
right, like with talking to Joe Queer a few months ago, and I said it then, and he agreed. I was like, when you go to the show, and first of all, the band is maybe a foot higher off the ground than you because the stage is so small, but when they look like they could just be members of the audience, and sometimes they are literally, they when they're done with their set, they just join the audience instead of I have to go backstage. And,
I have a bowl of green M&Ms backstage,
and they've been dipped in champagne for like it's
hung from the EPS podcast studios chandeliers.
That's what makes them so much more. And it's kind of a wonder sometimes that rock stars and pop stars with a chip on their shoulder and with that conceited attitude even still exist.
Yeah.
Because we've been gone.
Because they don't deserve it.
Right. And we've been gone long enough now with that kind of music of not so much like, yeah, I can do that too, but like you said, inspired by it. Be like, yeah, those are regular dudes.
Yeah.
Like they're not.
The fact that they took the time to speak to the little 15 or 16-year-old kid that was Tim back in the 90s was like, I'm going to get a guitar.
Yeah.
And,
they were at their merch table. They weren't,
Yep.
They were mainly because they needed you to buy the t-shirts so they could
get
gas money.
That never echoed with me. Like, this is their livelihood.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the Amazing Royal Crowns at the Elvis Room back in, it must be 95, I said I was a big fan to, I think it was Johnny the Colonel at the time. And he's like, yeah, come hang out backstage. I'm like, what?
What? Yeah.
And you remember the Elvis Room where the backstage was actually way on the other side of the...
So I actually missed the Elvis Room because we left this area in 1990. We moved away. And we would come back every summer for like a couple days vacation. But I never had the chance, to catch a show. It was never like the timing wasn't right or whatever. And I was so mad because I got into so many bands from this scene when I was living in northern New York. And I was like, I just missed it barely. Like if I had still lived there, I would definitely be at the Elvis Room or any of the other
clubs.
And
that lends to your point about experience shaping who you are later.
Yeah. Because we had a mainly hardcore, like that neo hardcore stuff scene where I lived up in Plattsburgh. And some punk, like my group was like the only like punk band in the scene. Is mainly like hardcore stuff, but we would play. There was this. It was awesome. We had this little ice cream store. Is old soda fountain on the city street.
Down at the Five and Dime and the soda shop.
The guy, it was a young guy and his wife, and they sold ice cream during the day, but then would have shows.
Oh, that's
at
awesome.
night, and it was like. You see how small these soda fountains are. That was like the room. It was like this long hall, and in the back they had just enough room for a band to play, and kids would dance a little bit, but it was mainly just like. And then sometimes there was a church across the street that let us use their basement on Saturday afternoons, and that was our scene. And we would have occasionally they'd get somewhat notable groups come through.
Yeah.
But it was like we didn't have the club. We didn't have like the real like with an actual legit stage.
So with that comes the other side of it. If you're underage, 21 plus kid.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a matinee and it'll be all ages. But 9 times out of 10 it was always 21 plus. So like I missed out on a lot of great gigs that were coming through at the time, and I'm not bitter about it.
I am. Yeah. I know. I get bitter all the time when I meet people that get to see groups that I missed for one reason or another, and know I won't see them again. Because they either don't exist anymore, they die, or But we also, because of so we went down where was it made or what locations are associated with this. when it comes to a lot of this. We chatted before about how we found out about all the things we're interested in, whether it be music, movies, Star Wars. We're both big Star Wars fans. And a lot of that had to, it's like this is stuff coming from other sides of the country, other sides of the world, but we have total access to it through media.
Yep.
The same magazines, the same eventually websites. Movies are all being. It wasn't like we got the New England version of Star Wars. Yeah.
Jesus Christ! Close the door. Close the door. The Millennium Falcon.
Blast door. I remember hearing a commercial years ago for some comic book store around here, and I don't know if it was some guy that worked there or if it was like they got the most heavily accented New England guy to do the commercial, but hearing him saying Star Wars cards and Pokemon cards was like the funniest thing. And I'm like, that is so...
Ken, your tauntaun's gonna freeze before you reach your first marker.
That would be, if we lived in... That'd be so funny if movies were still regional.
Yeah.
Like they either just like have you ever seen other countries' version of The Wizard of Oz?
No.
And I don't mean dubbed over. Like we have.
Where they?
I have a friend. They make their own. No, not even a farce. Like legit. Like I have a friend who's Turkish, and he in the early days of the internet or early 2000s, we were went to school together, and he's like, how about you look up the Turkish Wizard of Oz sometime? And we looked it up, and it was made in like the 70s. Oh my God! It was like I think they had a budget of like $200, and it was the same story. But Turkish actors and Turkish sets, it was just like, wow. I don't know how I got on that. Oh, yeah, because we were talking about if they made a different Star Wars for every part of the country. Like New England Star Wars.
Star Wars, Ken. Episode 1 is The Phantom Wicked Menace. Starring Tom Brady.
Anakin.
Tom, your beautiful smile.
Wicked.
I would like you to pause that so I could maybe have another.
Yeah. We're back. I got ticks for sticks here for,
Third caller on the Rock Hotline. You listen to WROX, Rocks Radio,
Caller.
where boomers love rock and roll. That's right.
Got caller 53 here. Can you identify all of the Smurfs?
I know there was Steve, Papa.
So the next question on the list of questions that I ask is, who's the intended audience? So when it comes to your music and the beer shop, who? I mean, obviously the maker of it, that's part of who you did it for, right? Your own satisfaction, your own interest. But who do you want? Who do you have in mind when you're writing your music or stocking your shelves?
Purveyor of fine fermented goods. I literally just kind of had an epiphany when you were saying that because, excuse me, thank you for the beer, by the way.
Yeah.
Come full circle. It's not for the commoner either. Mm-hmm. Like, because people come in all the time. You got regular beer. Nope, just irregular beer, clearly. Right. Pabst. And it's funny to watch people come in and go, hey, do you have regular beer? I go, what the fuck's that?
Yeah.
Mick Ultra. I got PBR. I got Hams, Ballantine, Schlitz, Colt 45 when it's available.
Utica
High
Club.
Life, Utica Club. Uncle Charlie's is what they call them upstate. I don't know if that's true. I just made that up. But
Oh, really? I've heard you
really
say it
what-
more a few times. I didn't know.
You're from that. area. I
Well,
thought you
not
were.
really anywhere near Utica, but we drink our
It's pronounced
our
Utica, actually.
Saranac beer. We
Oh
have,
yeah, it's the
Saranac.
same brewery.
Yeah,
Yeah. FX Matt.
I like Saranac.
What was I saying? Oh yeah.
So
it's not
it's-
like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a different clientele. And in my travels at the beer store, I've crossed paths with a lot of people in our circles.
Mhm.
We're gonna have to reboot my brain here to remember the name of the band. It's a Bash out of Rhode Island. Pause that and delete that because I'm gonna be embarrassed if I can't remember his name.
I will delete it.
Yeah, I don't believe you. It's off the record, Tim. Shit. God damn it. They were like a big punk band back in the 80s, and they did a documentary called "It's a Bash." Neutral Nation. Met the singer. He happened to come in one day because his brother had a camp on the lake, you know, and we got to talking, and like he ran into like his first gig was with Gigi Allen,
Whoa.
like, and I was like, so what did his poop smell like? For the listeners at home, Gigi Allen used to throw his feces onto the crowd.
In the zoo.
And yeah, I met a guy like 4 weeks back. His best friend was the singer of All.
Oh wow, I remember them. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Descendants
Yeah, it
Part
was
Two,
the- yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They went to college together, and like, I felt like I felt like Buffalo Bob or Buffalo Bill.
Buffalo
whatever,
Bill.
Whatever.
Hard to have
I
a beer.
locked the door. I was like, let's have a beer.
Ugh.
It was after hours.
Okay,
it was
so
cool.
it
It
wasn't,
wasn't
like, middle of the
creepy.
day, like-
They showed up, and I was like, we just started talking, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But but I've crossed paths with people that are like, hey, I saw you play at the thing
Yeah.
a while back, and so I think that there's a Venn diagram in my head right now of like
Yeah.
the beer store, and then the bands,
Right.
and then the cross section of people in the middle. They're not, you know, they're not the NPCs that walk amongst us. You know, would you like to buy a sword?
Yeah.
You know, they're just kind of standing around drinking their regular beer, hating their job, hating their
Right.
daily. That don't see outside the box.
I
You
remember-
couldn't have metaphysical conversation or philosophical discussions with them.
I remember hearing or reading Johnny Ramone saying that he's like, our fans are the best fans in rock and roll. He said they're the most musically knowledgeable people.
Yeah.
And it's like they all understood what the Ramones were doing, which was basically
The Beach Boys.
taking everything from
off.
before them, perfecting it, and then putting it right back out there. And that every single song that they played, every single show that they did, was basically they were carrying the torch of true rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And so those, you know,
Leather
you could
jackets,
be a fan
it was
of like
dangerous, you know.
the '60s,
Bubblegum Pop.
Yeah, it
Beach
was like
Boys.
it was there, and like it wasn't
New
just
York
like somebody
Dolls.
saying, "Yeah, our fans are the best." It's like they're the best because they know they're intellectuals,
Yeah.
you know, without being snobs, but they're intellectuals. You know, they're smart people, whether it's street smarts, book smarts, they're just smart thinking, you know, open-minded people that, you know, are whatever. And so it seems like there's another, you know, yours is not the only business like that either.
Right.
That is owned and operated by somebody in our age group that, you know, kind of has like, yeah, a lot of people could like it here, but there's going to be some like people like it more, you know,
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
It's like that you're going to get a lot of it.
And I think a lot of like the current logo and aesthetic and mindset and operation hours of operation are due in part to a woman who was mad that she couldn't come in during 2020 and coughed on me through the sliding glass window.
Weird.
On purpose. And I was like, you know what? Fuck these people. I don't owe them anything. This is
Yeah.
my business. I'm gonna change a logo. It was like a beer mug with hops and barley, and it was like very professional and
Yeah.
green. And now it's like, you've seen it. It's like the brew shop. Fuck you. This is what I
Yeah.
got. You know,
Well,
like leave.
I was so happy when I pulled into the parking lot
And
a few months
I
ago.
want to say that you pulled in between the white lines as opposed to perpendicular to them, like the woman who coughed on me in her 2006
everything
Dodge
wrong, right?
Avenger, driving a Dodge Avenger. Get the frick out.
But I remember, like, as soon as I pulled up, I was like, because I checked the website, but I wasn't really paying. I was just looking for the hours and stuff. And then
So you missed Hunter S. Thompson at the top.
I did. I guess so. I don't know. It was on my phone.
Good
It's
people
like,
drink good beer.
but as I pulled in and I saw the sign, and I'm like, that font looks up my alley. It looks like the kind. And I'm like, and then as soon as I walked in, I'm like, yep,
Yeah.
perfect. You know, it
Misfits
wasn't
clock up on the wall.
right. Yeah, you can't go wrong with a fiend. You know, every hour is the fiend hour.
Right,
you know.
this is correct. This is correct.
But it was like I was like, okay, I could, and it's pretty close. So that was awesome. You know,
Yeah.
and it honestly is not what you would expect in Chapley, Maine. It's not.
Right.
You know, I could picture it was almost like you and like a craft beer place in Portsmouth to trade places or something. you know?
Right. Well, my rent is way cheaper than Portsmouth's, but or Portland's for that matter.
Yeah.
It was slow going, you know, and just like any small business that's going to get up and running from the ground from zero takes time. But I'm seeing more people with the drive, the desire, and hopefully the patience to kind of see it through,
Yeah.
to do the independent thing. And because you can fight against the machine all you want, you're not going to win.
Right.
You know, the best you can do is pay all their licensing fees,
Right.
you know, play by those rules, and then whatever else is free for all.
It seems like our economy is becoming decentralized again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for a great long time, it was very centralized and big shopping malls and everything was like concentrated in one place. But that's what those of us who are interested in authentic, genuine, you know, local DIY, like you said, you have no choice sometimes to go into, you know, the microphone you're using came from a Guitar Center,
That's fine.
you know, because it's not like, you know, if this was 40 years ago,
Sometimes we
20
must
years
dance
ago,
with the devil.
yeah, we could go into some guy's record store, his guitar shop, and have, you know, "Hey, I think I got an old mic back here somewhere.
right.
I'll, you know, I'll find it for you. Yeah,
Give it to you for like,
$7. Yeah,
$100.
whatever. Yeah, and they would make a deal, and it's like we have, I think, just in our own lifetimes, you know, to bring this all around full circle, we came in kind of like at the tail end of one wave of, you know, symmetry and
Disco.
you know, homogenization, everything being the same, and we lived through an era where I think Joe Queer put it really well on the podcast. He said the 90s were like our 60s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was like,
Absolutely.
you know, making fanzines and, you know, getting, and we aided by the internet, and then we landed into the early 2000s and, you know, are kind of, you know, blazing our own paths using that internet tool. And now we're getting to a point where you can have, you know, multiple bands, a beer shop, a craft beer store, craft beer supply store. And like, I don't think that was a way to make a living in a previous generation.
Like back, circling back to what you said at the beginning, shift that slider down 41 years,
yeah.
you know, and that would be unheard of. Craft beer,
A liquor store, you know, you might have
Right.
the guy
a
from
packy is what they call them in
the kid from
North Shore, Massachusetts.
American Graffiti come in and, you know, can I have a
Milner. Oh,
no, not Milner.
Milner.
The
Froggy Eyes
the
there.
nerd, yeah, and he's like, "Oh, the pocket comb and bottle of Old Harper." And I love on The Simpsons when they replicate that scene when Homer's looking to get some fireworks at the when he's on vacation. And he's like, and he goes, "A bottle of Old Harper." And I'm like, American Graffiti.
When I was 17, I had a fake ID. My name
Very
was
good.
Bobby McGee.
When I was 17.
Another Simpsons reference real quick, because we're living in the times we are. The first time I heard on the news that there was a monkeypox, I thought it was monkey paw.
Oh,
The Treehouse of Terror, I don't know what
I
number.
think it was the third one.
Jesus, that's how old I am.
Second, it was Terror 2. It was the third season.
Okay.
So
So-
that's because the DVDs.
Yeah.
This is another thing of our generation. Simpsons DVDs.
The special edition DVD, but it's an addition to the regular edition DVD.
We have so much luxury because DVDs are now going away. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but
I have a tape player in
one
my
of the
truck.
things that I always used to do when DVDs were at their height was I would get like Simpsons or any movie, and I would always listen to the director commentary.
Oh yeah.
And learn all these little factoids and stuff like that. And now that
That was always
everything's-
after you watched everything else, though.
Yeah, I mean the streaming, you don't really get that anymore, and it's like so we got that window.
Yeah.
There was that window that lasted from 1981
But you know,
to
every generation is going to say that too. Like the generation before us will be like, "Well, you didn't have the blah blah blah," the phonograph or whatever.
yeah. You don't know what it's like 'cause you didn't have
Back
a-
in my
yeah.
day, that's what we're saying essentially. I think.
Yeah,
Back in my day, Eric.
we are kind of sounding sad, but
Back in my day, Reaganomics worked fucking swimmingly.
since you brought your guitar and your amp, would you be willing?
Hey,
To,
I brought 2 guitars.
Yeah, it's true. Play them at the same time. Would you be
All
willing
right.
to take us out with some music? We're wrapping up this episode of the EPS podcast, where everything's a primary source with Tim Abalo.
Hey, what's happening?
And I'm also simulcasting this live from the Palace, my studio, which is also a garage. And you're going to take us out of the podcast with some of your psychobilly punk rock.
All right.
Or whatever you want to do.
I don't know. Now I'm on the.
And put you on the spot.
Well, I thought getting high and drinking beer would be a really cool career. Playing rock and roll on the side. I thought getting my getting all wired out like I hoped. I left high school 20 years ago, and here I am, lo and behold, with all my bills, and now I'm upside down. Stuck at a job I can't stand, and now I look like a plane. Now I've got nowhere. Well, I'm really broke, and that's no joke. I spent every last dime that I had. Spinning out boots, cars and tops, all that evil rock and roll. But you know I got so messed up that I had on my soul. No to you, this may seem weird, following your silly dreams. It's the only thing that makes me smile. But weekends I'm out on the road and I'm getting drunk and I'm getting stoned. You know somehow I'll make it home. Here we go. Well, I'm really broke, and that's no joke. I spent every last dime that I had. Spending on drugs, cars, guitars, and all that evil rock and roll. You know I got so messed up that I had to sell my soul. Let me tell you, it came at a hefty price too, kid. And no to you, and this may seem mild. Following your stupid dreams is the only thing that make me smile. But weekends I'm out on the road and I'm getting drunk and I'm getting towed. You know somehow I gotta make it home. You know somehow I gotta make it home. Well, how the heck am I gonna make it?
That was great.